On behalf of SAIA Practice, welcome to SAIA. Welcome to all SAIA members, friends of SAIA, and those who have joined us for the first time. This is the final SAIAshare event for 2022. My name is Eugene Barnard, Emil Paulson, and I will be your hosts. Emil is our executive for practice at SAIA. Good afternoon, Emil. Corina Gibson from ECPD is at our side to make sure that all goes well according to plan. Welcome, Corina, and welcome also to Angelique from our kind sponsors, Duravit. Thank you very much for your loyal support over the past 2 years. We have 2 very interesting presentations this afternoon. So please participate by posting questions or comments in the questions box, and we will try and deal with them during the Q&A sessions after each of the presentations. In session 2, Georg van Gas will be addressing us on human-centric design architecture for the people as demonstrated by the work of Gas Architecture Studio. But first, in session 1, Emil is going to introduce you to Alex Ringelmann. Over to you, Emil.
Thank you kindly, Eugene, and good afternoon, everybody. Alex Ringelmann is a professional electronic engineer that has worked in diverse fields and industries such as industrial automation, building information modeling, and electrical infrastructure development over the last 15 years. These diverse experiences have provided him with unique insights that inform his approach to data science, machine learning, and software development. Over the past 18 months, Alex has made a significant career change into software development, and he is currently a development operations engineer at Curry, which is a mobile app that facilitates safe, quick, and convenient payments to schools and other community organizations. Alex will speak on smart buildings and explain to us how to plan for smart, maintainable buildings. Thank you, Alex. I hand over to you.
Cool. Thank you very much. Let me start sharing my screen. All right, you should be able to see my screen.
We can.
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you very much for having me. I am delighted to be able to present to you today. So I'm going to talk about smart buildings, essentially, and a couple of experiences I've had relating to smart buildings over the years. So I'm a professional electronic engineer. I started my career as a robotics engineer. Chances are quite good that every single one of you either currently owns or has owned something in the past that was either manufactured or assembled or painted or labeled or packaged by a robot that I programmed in the late 2000s. So after that, I moved on I changed fields from robotics into consulting engineering, mostly because I thought I wanted to go into renewable energy and sustainability and so on. So I moved to Delta Built Environment Consultants, where I spent 10 years, 5 of which were head of department and professional engineer in the electrical engineering department. I was very broad spectrum in what I did there. So I designed substations and transformers and plugs and lights until they came out of my ears, and solar PV, mostly rooftop, but also a little bit of ground mount, medium-sized things. Eventually, I I started specializing more and more in ICT, so networks and security. One of the biggest projects I've ever done was the networking and all of the CCTV and access control at Africa's biggest air freight cargo terminal in Ethiopia. And the last thing that I did before I moved away from consulting is a building management system for the University of Mpumalanga. So the entire campus, basically, which consists of approximately 20 buildings, is now managed by a system that I specified, which includes lights and HVAC, and basically just reducing the maximum demand of the campus. Okay, so I have now in the last year moved away from consulting, and I'm now basically a software developer, working as a DevOps engineer for a company called Carry. So it's basically an app that allows schools to go cashless. For those of you that don't know what a DevOps engineer is, which I assume is pretty much everybody, I am to a software developer what a structural engineer is to an architect. So in other words, for those of you in Midrand, you know that PwC building, that twirly one, it was sort of dreamt up and brought into existence by an architect, but there was a team of structural engineers that had to be pretty creative to make that thing not fall over when it was complete, basically. And in a similar sense, software developers bring their vision into existence, be it the Uber app or the Google Maps app or whatever. In my case, it's the Carry app. And then DevOps engineers in the background basically design the backbone from which the app can operate. And we also need to get quite creative to make sure that when things like Black Friday happens and there's a 10,000-fold increase in traffic on the app, that it doesn't fall over, and that hackers can't steal your credit card information from the system. And that's essentially what I do now. So back to smart buildings. About 5 years ago, when I was working at Deltabek, one of our clients had a greenhouse that needed to be automated. So I basically automated it for them, and I enjoyed it so much that I decided I'm just going to automate my own house. And I enjoyed that so much that I ended up deciding I want to rather go into software development and not be a consulting engineer anymore. So it's quite close to my heart, and I can say that I've gone crazy with my house. So every single light is automated with a very sophisticated algorithm that I wrote from scratch. It's so sophisticated it sometimes drives me a bit nuts. My house, for example, knows exactly when I'm about to go to bed, so it turns all the lights red. So it puts me in a nice sleepy mode. I've got lots of daylight sensors and motion sensors. There's certain doors that have smart locks on them, so my housekeeper can just tap her phone on the door on the days that she's here, and then it opens for her. My watch does the same. At some point I could talk to my doors and they would unlock, but then I realized that's a bit unsafe, so I've stopped that. My driveway gate is exactly the same. You just tap things against it and it opens. I've got a solar geyser, but when it's cloudy, obviously you need electricity to heat the water. So I've developed a little algorithm that sort of decides when I might need water, and then it turns on, otherwise it doesn't turn on. And if it doesn't see my cell phone, it assumes I'm not at home, so then it doesn't turn on the geyser. Armed response, I can just talk to it. So I've written my own integration to talk to my armed response to turn on the alarm and things like that. And smoke detectors, if there is a fire, basically all the detectors will sound, not just the one where the fire is. It'll turn on my TV even if the TV is off, and on the TV it's going to show a map of my house and it's going to tell me where it thinks the fire is. And then all of my smart speakers basically will tell me with a human voice, there's a fire and this is where the fire is, and the lights flash in a certain blue and red sequence to get my attention, and then they turn to white so that I can see what's going on. And that's only half of it, because I'm going to skip through this because I see I'm running a bit behind time, but my kettle turns on before I wake up and it's connected to my alarm. When I wake up in the morning, same with the microwave. At some point when I was using heaters, I did the same with heaters, but I've stopped using them just because it's a bit wasteful. And I've also got a piano where I've got like my lights integrated with the piano. It's an old piano that I got from my granny, so it's not even a digital one. And just very briefly, I had dreams of automating my windows, that they close when it rains and the curtains do their own thing. And even in my car, that useless little like skid control button that nobody presses, I figured I can repurpose that to, when I press it, that it opens my gate, for example. But I've just realized life is too short, so I probably won't do any of these things, but it has been on my horizon at some point. And then load shedding came. And even though I've got a UPS where a lot of my house is on UPS, not all of the house is on UPS, and it actually results in my system becoming really unstable during load shedding, to the point that, like, the worst thing that ever happened is my driveway gate one morning just decided to open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close. And it took me half an hour before I picked that up, and my dogs were out in the road and it was just crazy. And that's when I realized I need to switch this thing off, and because I currently don't have time to just deal with it and fix it. So while load shedding is a thing, my home automation system is off. And that kind of brings me to the point of my presentation, and that is for a building automation system to be effective with the current technology that we have, it's actually it can become very complicated and extremely difficult to maintain. So what I've learned in my own house, and also just working as a consulting engineer, seeing how other people have implemented building management systems in other buildings, I've kind of realized there's certain things that you absolutely need. And obviously I'm talking about commercial buildings now, so this doesn't necessarily relate to residential. You need amazing internet, amazing, robust, secure networks. You need Wi-Fi that is seamless. So people who are in your building are going to have an expectation of certain things that they can do in your building. If they walk around and things just don't work because their cell phones lose reception, that is just not going to cut it. Security increasingly is becoming a thing, just with data security and things like that, but that is also balanced against privacy. So CCTV is becoming quite complicated in certain respects, just from a privacy point of view. And obviously the whole reason why we're doing this is for the buildings to be sustainable. So the utilities need to be managed. That's like the big thing of smart buildings, but it needs to be done in a way that the comfort is still optimized for all the occupants. And I've sort of realized almost more important than that is it needs to be cheap to run and cheap to maintain. Otherwise, it's not going to be implemented properly or run properly, and it just falls flat and deteriorates. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. It's basically, there's three ways in which you can do something. You can do it well, you can do it cheaply, or you can do it fast. You can do two of those things at once, but you can't do all three. So I won't go into detail, but I've developed a sort of a similar thing for smart buildings from my experience. So a smart building can be seamless and inobtrusive, where the occupants don't even realize there's a system running in the background. It could also be, sorry, I just realized my camera is on. Let me turn it off so that you can see my screen better. It can also, so it's seamless, so nobody knows it's there. It can be low maintenance, so it's cheap and easy, and it can be resource efficient, and it can be two at once. But for example, if you've got something that's resource efficient and seamless and inobtrusive, it's usually very expensive and very complicated, and you need an army of PhD graduates almost with computer science degrees to run the thing, because it's so complicated. An example of that is like a promise that's been sort of made about smart buildings is one day, and products like this exists, where you install a system in the building and it knows that Alex has walked into the building and Alex's office is on the 3rd floor, and therefore as soon as I walk in the front door, my HVAC turns on and the lights turn on and all of that amazing stuff. And these things exist, so I'm not saying they don't exist, but what I've just seen is they either don't get implemented because it gets commissioned and it works maybe for a couple of months, but then the facilities team just can't cope with the burden of keeping this thing up to date with all the people that go and new people arriving, and it just falls flat. And those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about when I say it's not low maintenance. So it might be amazing, but it doesn't, it's especially now since COVID, I've noticed buildings are not operated to the same level that they used to be, because I think facilities managers just don't have the budget that they used to have. So then, let me just find my button here. That leads me to what's called the Gartner hype cycle, which is basically the cycle of technology. So when a technology gets announced and people become familiar with it, there's usually a lot of hype around it. And a good example is what we know as our digital life these days. The fact that we can take something that looks like a slab of chocolate and it connects wirelessly to every other device in the world, and it can navigate us with a map from one place to another and divert us around traffic, and we can order food with it, and we can make video calls free of charge with people on the other side of the planet. That idea and the concept of all of that I've just mentioned has existed since the 1950s. People have been talking about precisely that since the 1950s. And as late as 15 years ago, that dream hadn't really materialized yet. But in the 70s, people were convinced this is around the corner. Like by the 90s, we are going to be super digital, and it didn't happen. We had the internet, but the level to which this dream was realized did not materialize. And so technology, there's always hype in the beginning, and then after a while people realize that the technology is not there. There's a trough of, let me just get some pointers going as well, the trough of disillusionment, and then eventually, in the case of our smartphones and stuff, it took decades, but eventually we got to a point where it's now where people expected it to be. It's not quite there. There's still a lot of stuff that people were expecting in the 70s that will never materialize, but we're almost there. Now the question is, I feel with sustainable buildings, just from my perception of life in general, I'm very much in this dip right now, where the promise of the smart building hasn't materialized, and it's because the technology to do it efficiently and easily without complication does not exist. And the one thing that is going to bring us there is when the system can think for itself and just learn by itself without having to have all these humans that need to like pamper it the whole time. And that is obviously artificial intelligence. So I'm quickly going to try and play a video now. There's a thing called Moore's law. Okay, so you should see this video now. So Moore's law is basically a law that predicts that computing power will double every 18 months, and this law has held true for the last half a century, basically. There are signs that it's maybe starting to slow down, but it's complicated. It's not necessarily slowing down. And so if you look, this is a lake where water drops into the lake, but the rate at which the water drops into the lake doubles every 18 months. And that basically represents computing power. So the point is for 70 years in this little animation. Let me just Okay, so basically my message is just we humans are pretty bad at understanding exponential growth, but that is a nice illustration of how it works. We don't necessarily see progress until suddenly there is just progress because it's been building up exponentially without us really noticing it. So artificial intelligence also follows the Gartner hype cycle. It's still a long way away from actually being realized in terms of what our expectations, and in many cases we don't even have expectations yet. We're still figuring it out, so it's going to take a while. But the interesting thing is we've got this, as humans, we've got this distorted view of things, like I said, and one of them is that we don't really understand the difference between a clever human and a not so clever human in comparison to the animal world. So if we've got a computer that's basically as intelligent as an ant is, the way we perceive life in general, that computer is still quite far away from our intelligence. But in reality, there's very little difference between us, the cleverest of us and the least clever of us, and there's a lot of variation in the animal world. And so as a computer gets as smart as, in terms of its capacities, as certain animals, it's basically a lot closer to us than we might think that it is. And especially since it's growing exponentially, there's a prediction that many experts have made that sometime this century there's going to happen what's called the singularity, which is the moment at which computers become as capable and as intelligent as humans, depending on how you define intelligence. And certain experts think this will never happen, but the vast majority are convinced it will. If it happens, it will definitely happen, or most probably happen sometime this century. And the average consensus seems to be around 2045. So if you've got children born today or grandchildren born today, by the time they finish school and get to university, if these predictions are correct, then they will be surrounded by machines that are as capable as they are, which is quite something. So then the question is just how does this affect the way buildings are planned, and what should you do about it in terms of smart buildings, given that this amazing intelligence is not probably going to exist sometime in the next 20 to 30 to 40 years to manage buildings for us and make them really smart. How will that change? And the answer is very little will change. The biggest thing that I can say is just understand the basics, and I'll get to that in a moment, what that means, and distinguish fantasy from reality. It's a bit difficult to do that sometimes. And also keep reminding yourself, and this is probably the most important thing, that the future is getting more digital, not less. So front and center of every planning that you do should be how are your decisions relating to the digital future. And just working with architects for many years, one thing that I picked up is there's usually very little collaboration between ICT engineers and everybody else. And so sort of all I can say is try and collaborate more, or see network people in general and technology people in general. Engage with them right from the start, like you do with structural engineers, or just in terms of planning buildings and stuff like that. And also, given that things are getting more wireless, buildings are going to need more wireless infrastructure. So for example, with every increment in technology in terms of like 4G, 5G, 6G, the antennas are getting quicker and faster and better, but it also means you need more of them in smaller spaces. So 6G, chances are quite good, if one day when 6G arrives, that you'll probably have an antenna in almost every room, basically, cell phone antennas, especially in things like shopping centers and even in residential neighborhoods. You're going to have a lot of this stuff. So the question is not what are you doing today to design for them in terms of, but how flexible are your structures and your spaces that you've planned to make it easy for these things to be added in 10 years or in 20 years or in 30 years. And allocate funds in terms of the budget of the building to basically just make it flexible, and have a systems integrations mindset that as part of space planning and everything else is a technology planning, which I'll get to know what that means. The biggest thing, I see I'm running out of time, so I'm going to breeze through this, is cables will never disappear. Things are getting wireless, and one example of it is all cell phone chargers are wireless, and your cars these days have wireless chargers. So you could argue there's no cables anymore. But then I would say if you remove the dashboard from your car and look at what's behind the dashboard and see how many cables are behind that dashboard compared to 20 years ago or 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it is probably 100-fold. Cables are not disappearing. They're getting more. So the question is, what are we doing as sort of the built environment to make sure that whatever we design and that we create is future-proof? And I think my message is don't make the mistake that cables are disappearing. If anything, they're just going to get more. One good example is fast charging cars. Just a fast charging car, just one, needs 350 kilowatt worth of power, and that is equivalent to a 700 square meter office block, which is why you see so few fast charging stations around. They have enormous power requirements, and enormous power means enormous cables. So even with fast charging, cables are getting bigger. Cell phone charging cables are getting bigger. Fast charging implies bigger cables. It's a law of physics that you can't get around. So I predict within the next 15 to 20 years, your cell phone cables are going to be really thick things compared to what they are today. Cable trays, plan, so it doesn't matter what the future holds in terms of like smartness of the buildings. The basics that you can do just to make sure that it's flexible is just lots of space for networking stuff, because this stuff is not going away, and so that you don't end up with buildings like this in future, because we might not be able to predict what happens in the future. Distribution boards, what I've highlighted there in orange is just a typical distribution board, let's say for a typical floor without building management system. But if you add BMS, this is a really ridiculous example, but this is how much bigger the thing becomes. So space again, so even if it's not in your building now, it might be there in future, and just make space and make it flexible. And just another thing, before to wrap up, just to quickly breeze through this, technology is not difficult to understand. And what I mean by that is this drawing that I've got right now is how networks work, computer networks, and it hasn't changed since 1973. So this standard, basically what I've drawn, has been around for over half a century. Things like telephones and CCTV might not have been connected to these things in the 70s, but the overall way that these things work hasn't changed. The way the internet works, this is a bit beyond the scope of sort of building planning and so on, but it's called TCP/IP. The internet has not changed in 50, 60 years, whatever the difference is. Server rooms haven't changed. If you look in the 70s and now, they've got the same raised floor. They both have like requirements in terms of cable trays. The way they laid out is pretty similar. Nothing's changed. So my message is, often I think people think that technology is changing and everything's so rapid. And yes, certain things change, but certain things absolutely do not change. And I would say the one thing with server rooms that might change is that they might get smaller the more we go into the cloud. But that's only server rooms. It's not things like patch rooms. And network cables haven't changed since 1993. They might change a little bit, but I am not going to go into the details. The consequence is you might actually need even more patch rooms than before, because in future the distance limitation is only 30 meters and not 100 meters, which basically means more of everything. So essentially, my message is that you can't understand everything, and the future is quite uncertain, and technology is very complicated. But there are certain things that you can try to understand, which will allow you to create much more future-ready buildings which are flexible, regardless of what happens in future. And those are pretty simple things, and you can take that from me. I've been doing this for a long time. The stuff that is simple to understand is the most effective. And it comes down to project management and just understanding space planning requirements for these things. Cool, and that's it. Sorry, I've rushed this presentation a bit because I noticed I'm running out of time. Just one last thing, remember to use a proper password manager, and Google Chrome is not a proper password manager. And that's all from my side.
Emil, if you feel anything like I feel at the moment, then you probably have absolutely nothing to say. I'm quite speechless, but please lead the conversation. Emil, where do we go from here? And I'm just hoping that that we'll get some questions from our attendees, because
I think your
mind-boggling.
It was, and your enthusiasm is quite something, Alex, and thank you for sharing. This is obviously a tremendous passion of yours, and I think we can certainly sense that in the presentation. I'm also, I must say, a bit befuddled by it all. Well, just before perhaps we go into these questions, my mom bought me an Alexa from a recent trip to the UK. So I would greatly appreciate if you can assist me to connect that soon, because I haven't even managed to do that.
That's actually precisely my point. Sorry, my intention was actually not to befuddle everybody. So I'm disappointed that I managed to do that. But that is my point. Alexa, something as simple as Alexa, is difficult to configure, and that speaks to the complexity of just smart buildings in general. If you're struggling with Alexa, imagine how facilities managers are struggling with their smart buildings, and that is my point. And that is, I know I dealt a little bit, maybe too much on the artificial intelligence side, but I sort of see a future where once AI gets to a point where it's actually functional and usable and not just this theory that people are talking about, it's going to make a real measurable difference on how smart buildings are designed or how they operate. And I think my point is, we don't need to worry too much about designing for that and anticipating what that's going to look like. There's just some small basic things that we can do now just to make them future ready. And it basically comes down to just make it easy to install cables and install systems. And in future, people will find a way to make this thing smarter once they are able to do that with AI, essentially.
Emil, would you like to take us through the questions and comments that have come in?
Certainly, I'll do that. There are a few here. First from Abigail. How can we book a tour of your house? I think that's just an aside. I think that.
Well, once load shedding is no more, then I'll turn it on and then we can do it.
Okay, terrific. And Deepti says here, informative, thank you. Morake asks, what are the examples of proper password manager, And there was another question, in fact, straight after that, Gabriel asks, can you please recommend a proper password manager?
Okay, the short answer is most of the adverts that you see on YouTube for password managers are good enough. So LastPass, Dashlane, 1Password, whatever those things are. My favorite one is called Bitwarden, and the reason is it is open source. So I'm not sure if many of you guys are familiar with open source, but it's basically the entire source code is published on the internet, so anybody can scrutinize the code. And it sounds counterintuitive. So if you think about it this way, you've got a password manager that you want to be really secure, but you're taking the inner workings of that password manager and you're showing the whole world how this thing works. And you'd think, okay, but then hackers can see how it works and they can hack into it. But it actually works the other way around, because everybody who is sort of inclined to look at this code will see all the vulnerabilities, and then they'll basically fix them and make recommendations to the people who maintain the software, and then they implement those fixes. And so it ends up being a very much more robust system, even though it's completely transparent. And that's what I use. But also one important point, you don't have to pay for a password manager. So I'm not saying you now have to go and buy stuff. You get many of them. Most of them have free plans, and it's mostly better than Chrome, just because Chrome is quite easy to hack. And if you want, I would be happy to demonstrate that to you. If you don't believe me, we can set up a meeting somewhere, and I will take yourself and I will show you how easy I can hack into your bank and your everything, your Gmail, just with just because you're saving things on Chrome, which wouldn't be possible if you used a different password manager.
Okay, right. Carry on, Emil. Would you like to?
Certainly. Let me carry on here. Tina said, do you have a dedicated server room to run your house system?
The short answer is you increasingly don't need that. So if I wanted to, I could run it in the cloud. Actually, let me show you an example. Okay, I should have anticipated this question. Okay, so there's what's called a Raspberry Pi, which is a computer device, a computer that's as big as a credit card. Sorry, I actually can't see myself, so I'm not sure if you guys can see me, but I'm holding it up.
I can see you.
How old is it? Yeah, so this is not a Raspberry Pi, but it is the same size as a Raspberry Pi. And at some point, I actually automated my entire house off just one of these. I ended up having a computer that was just on the whole time for something else, and I've just moved it onto that computer, running what's called Docker. So I'm now going into sort of really technical jargon, but there's this amazing thing called Docker, which is basically what the entire IT industry now uses. And I've now gone to running everything on Docker on that computer. But to answer your question, no. If I wanted to, it could be just in the cloud. I didn't even need anything in my house physically.
Incredible.
Right. Okay.
If I may, Eugene, I'm conscious
carry
of
on,
time.
Please carry on.
So, yeah. Great. The compliments here coming through, Alex, from Roger, who says really well presented, loved it. Shane says very interesting presentation, and he asks whether this will be available to attendees afterwards. I can say to everybody that SAIAshare events are published again on our website, so if one wants to go and take a look at it again, you're welcome to do so. Gert says here, Alex, thanks for clarifying really simple things that we have managed to completely enmesh in complicity just because we can. I think that I'm not quite sure what is it. Complicity?
Probably no. Nevertheless.
Nevertheless, Marakis asks here. That's again a question about a digital a design server room in a house. Marius asked a question that I'm also not sure about this abbreviation. What about EMF? Will it increase then? I don't quite understand EMF.
Yeah, EMF, it's electromagnetic. I can't remember what the F stands for, but basically, sorry, let me just quickly Google it to make sure that I understand the question as well. But it's interference, if I understand it correctly. Yeah, it's basically, okay, yeah. The short answer is, I'm not really qualified to answer it, so I might be wrong. But obviously, I think, let me answer it this way. If you look on the back of pretty much any appliance that has or any device that has a antenna in it, so your cell phone or anything, there's usually a little FCC sticker, and that FCC sticker basically certifies that this device has been designed and tested against certain standards, and that it will not emit more than a certain amount of acceptable radiation. And I think people and engineers are getting quite good over the years in determining how to minimize it and find techniques to reduce it and so on. So I think one just for an example from my own life that I've noticed where I would say EMF is probably going to go down and not up, even though I might be wrong, is cell phones. So back in the 90s and the 2000s, if you put a cell phone close to any speaker, like your radio in your car, there was always this and most of you beyond a certain age will know exactly what I'm talking about. And you don't get that anymore. So the EMF that came out of or just interference in general that came out of cell phones 20 years ago has been solved to some degree. But I must just say I haven't researched it or looked into it or read much about it, so I might be completely wrong. So don't take my word for it.
Thanks,
sorry,
Alex.
there were some other questions which I missed.
There are quite a few here that I'm looking at now. Eugene, are we still all right for
yes, you know,
time-wise?
we're actually not. So I'm going to ask Alex. Alex, would you mind with a yes or no answer? Sydney wants to know, Google Chrome automatically keeps passwords for convenience. I never saw that as a password management, as I used a separate system on the phone. Should one then erase records on Chrome? Yes or no?
Convenience for you means convenience for hackers and criminals.
Okay. Okay. Anna wants to know, how do you go about convincing a reluctant project team to integrate these systems?
Yeah, if
yes
you can
no?
tell me, if you can tell me, I would be very happy. I tried for 10 years. I must say, I mean, there was some. I must just make one shout out. It's a name that I saw in the attendance list, Ludwig Stale. I must just commend you. I had quite a good time working with you at UMP because it was just, yeah, easy to just get these things in place in those buildings. It wasn't perfect in terms of I messed up certain things and I think there were some mistakes at the end which were caused by me. But in general, yeah, I think it basically means you should have an open mind.
Okay.
And
great. Alex, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to acknowledge everyone who sent in questions. We'll ask Corina to let you have these questions.
Yes.
And if you have a chance, maybe you can just, with a quick comment to each of the guys, if you have the time. We should, you know, have allowed more time, but unfortunately the format of SAIAshare does not allow that. So Patrick, Sydney, Nico van Donder, Leon van Heerden, Ken Lever, Gert Bolt, Gabriel again, Ken Lever again. Thank you so much for asking these questions. But we're going to have to just thank Alex. And Alex, can I just say, you know, I thought that architects were good at doing PowerPoint presentations. And I thought that engineers generally had very dull presentations, but yours has been spot on, superb. And I want to thank you once again for accepting the invitation to come and address SAIAshare. Please stay with us because we still have a very interesting presentation to follow. Once again, thank you, Alex. And Emil, that brings us then to our sponsors. And I'm going to ask Duravit then to take over for the next few minutes and give us your video. Thanks.
know we always hit the bullseye. Everybody that's in the box, step it up, but don't sweat it. I don't know about you, but we're ready. They tell me, yeah, I'm a gem. What? I'm elemental, straight in my jacket, yeah, I'm a hella mental, and I want to get a pencil. Better take notes, better lay low. Red, white, pinstripe, all laced up. Rise and heat, feel the heat, feel the hunger. Heads high, eyes wide, we can't stop. Line it up and take a shot. You know we always hit the bullseye. Try. Yeah, even if we're closing our eyes, you know we always hit the bullseye. I can see the finish line, got the inner vision, and nothing's ever holding me back. Hey, everybody that's on the sidelines, forget it. Just remember, if you want to be number one, I gotta tell you.
We're still on track, so colleagues, now it's my privilege to introduce you to our second presenter, and what a privilege it is, Georg. As I mentioned, I knew your father, and so I'm delighted that you accepted the invitation to share on SAIAshare this afternoon. Just to remind you all, Georg was born in Pretoria. His family relocated to Kimberley after his dad, also an architect, was asked to join a company there. Georg studied at the University of Pretoria some years ago. He founded Gas Architecture Studio in 2005. The firm operates from two centers, Johannesburg and Stellenbosch. Gas Architecture Studio has predominant focus on urban regeneration architecture and interior architecture. Georg will be speaking on the topic human-centric design architecture for the people. by referring to the exciting work their practice is doing. So, Georg, over to you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. It's a sincere privilege to be here today, and I hope I don't bore you. Can I just ask, can everybody see my screen?
Georg, we can see your screen and we see your face as well. So
let's not spoil it by seeing my face. So thank you. Yeah. Gas architecture studios, like Eugene just said, was really founded in 2005. For some other reason, I'm giving some problems here. Let's just see if that goes. There we go. And what I mean by human-centric design and architecture for the people is really the ethos that we have, and it's where we like to design buildings, what we call background buildings. So background buildings are by no means ugly buildings. They're buildings that are there and complement their surroundings, but they are built further with the ethos of really form follows function, and making sure that the buildings complement the people that use them's lives, and not only the people that commission the project, but also the people that pass by. So we find that a lot of buildings that are going up around the world, and not just really in South Africa, sort of mostly ignore the passerby, the consequential users. So we try and make sure that we do complement the user's experience, but also the people that pass by. And why we so love it so much to work in sort of urban renewal projects and things like that is that we really do work for people that don't necessarily can afford architects. So we enhance people's lives and hopefully just trigger a little bit of a thought of what architecture is and what the influence thereof is. And we know that the big thing in really in architecture and life is that to design for people and have architecture for the people, you need people to ultimately design with you. And we understand that without these people that are on the screen, gas would be nothing. And with all the efforts that all these people play and what they do, we can create things that we are all proud about, and ultimately make sure that we give our clients and our users the best experience in there. And we have designed buildings for various scales of people, and we are privileged enough to have buildings that we are very proud of. And we have designed buildings for a small number of people, and generally just people and families out there. And some of these projects you might know. And this is one of our first projects, and it was lucky enough to build an amazing building in a surrounding where people luckily see the surrounding and the location. And hopefully this building out near Swellendam complements the location and the engagement that people have with this amazing setting. We have also had the privilege to design a building called the Westcliff Pavilion that is set on the Westcliff Ridge. And this building was actually designed for an elderly couple as a sort of a garden cottage and a granny flat as such. But it was really designed by the location, and we can only really put this building at a certain place, and we couldn't get concrete there. We couldn't get a lot of material there, so we had to cart in steel and things, and we lifted the building off the ground because we couldn't really dig in to the ground with the rock that we have here. So all the rock that you see on this image is actually harvested from the site. And the only concrete used in this building is sort of little plinth fittings, and then in the bathrooms to deal with the water that is generated in the bathroom space there. And I think this was such an amazing project that we've done, and that we did it in 2010. And we, to this day, get inquiries about this project. So it is really amazing, and it founded a lot of thought and processes we do. And if one looks, for instance, at this, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but if you can see, that is really where we think of the lounge and the dining room as really as our patio. So there's no real need for further spaces and things. You can open up and make your house a patio. And a lot of the architecture we've done is more sort of the high felt, and where we can actually open doors and open things and engage with that. This is a house in the Bryanston area where we like to, for instance, put your covered patio to the side, but that opens up into the rest and doesn't block the natural light and sun coming into the lounge and the dining room spaces, so that you don't have an area where you now in the future enclose that to make it some more livable apparently, and things, but you have the space at the side, so it just complements your life. And whether that patio was sitting here or there, it is, it's the proximity to the kitchen, the rest of the house is still there. The next house is a house we did in the Stellenbosch area, and what was amazing about this house is that although it was built over 3 different levels, all 3 levels was living out onto natural ground. And within there, we did create a space in between the 2 main spaces of the building where you can still go outside and be sheltered from the wind and live out on there. But you still had the beautiful patio that gave you these vistas over the Stellenbosch Valley, and where the real sort of blurring of inside-outside living was there, because although you had a bit of a covered patio, on a good day, you can just slide open the doors and your lounge and your dining room will be your patio, covered patio space. The next house is a renovation we did for friends in Johannesburg, and it's amazing, and it lives into sort of the surrounding spaces, and how that all connects into different spaces is important. And I'm lucky enough to frequent this house every now and again, and just to see how these people still utilize the space and making sure that it is still a livable space and it enhances the inhabitants' lives. Next one is a small little pool house we did also in the Dragonstein Paarl Valley area near Devonvale. And it was a small little addition and an additional house or building on the property. But just that has created a different space for the users and the homeowners to utilize and make it so much better to go just to the pool. But it created an additional entertainment space with these framed views into the valley as well. The next one is an endeavor to create a house that doesn't scream in a golf estate that had very big, ostentatious houses. And this is really a small footprint house, but it was also an interesting house where a massive slope on the property, and you enter on street level, but then had to come down a series of a stair that led you into sort of the ground floor space, where it was really, again, their patio that they lived in. And if you have a look at that and the space at the top, how that sort of has that views onto the golf course to the side. And then at the top still, but on our entrance level, we had the 3 bedrooms that was there and more than sufficient for the family and how they sort of used this. This is a renovation of a house in Johannesburg as well, and what you can see to the top view there is just the sliding of the complete opening of that elevation and having that view into the garden space. And what we did here as well is just on the street front, you can sort of see it on the side here, we didn't have another gate, another security line. The house is good enough for that security line. And I had created a view for the inhabitants on this patio at the top, which you can see there, that is just to the back of this image, that goes into a green belt that goes through Johannesburg. And with this guest bedroom that engages that and then engages the traffic on a daily basis, people walking and cycling and running, jogging past the house. But the security is still there, and everybody just opens up in a fresh sort of way of engaging with people on the street level. This is a lovely new project we recently completed in Nahanklipp in Bingle Bay, and it's a small beach cottage. But again, it's all about that sort of living and enhancing the inhabitants' lives and pushing people in how they live, and not just doing the mundane, and creating nice spaces, how that interacts with the natural environment. This house we're very proud of is in Hermanus, and it's actually a return client. So the same client that we built the Swellendam house for, we did this 2-bedroom house, and it's for him and his wife, and they love the space and how they've really engaged them, and how the client practices his archery and his whole sort of meditation spaces, and it's a compact space. But we also design and where great focus of us is engaging more people's lives, and we've been lucky enough to really get involved in a lot of urban renewal projects, and this is one of our first. Was a upgrade and a demolition and a building of 469 apartments in the Kempton area, and where we sort of we started eating the elephant a little bit, bite by bite, and engaging the client and making sure that we do create spaces and outdoor spaces for people, and also looked at how we interface these buildings on street level and make it a safe environment to walk, but also which you can barely see on that side, is creating what we call sky courts, where the inhabitants, when they do live in a 40 square meter apartment, they can go outside and just get some more fresh air and have a smoke or engage people. But what we also focus on a lot is bringing art into our projects, and these are sculptures by a sculptor called Francois Visser, and it was just very easy and engaging stuff for people to interact with on street level. This is a project in Pretoria's Johannesburg CBD called Dance Place. It's also a conversion of an existing office building into residential, and again, trying to just create and finding spaces where people can really interact and where they can just go outside. This is an upgrade of the building in Johannesburg as well on Elof Street for conversion into a school, and just really very limited budgets, but just like small interventions. And the color, if you look down Elof Street, you actually see this yellow, and it's amazing impact that it has. This is a project called Frank's Place, and what's amazing here is we went through various permutations and working around it with the client, and it had this podium here, and the QS said, no, but we need to take that existing structure and put more units in there. And luckily we convinced the client to really do an outdoor space, both for child's play area, but also a bit of a basketball court and some braai and entertainment facilities with table tennis courts or tables. And with that, some of the tenant or the landlord and the developers, tenants that live in adjacent buildings, saw this space in top here and decided to move from those buildings into this building. So people do really need outdoor spaces. This is the building that we did in Pretoria. It's just off Church Square on Madiba Street. It is called One on Mutual. It has a 144 apartments in it, and it does have also retail, and then we had to put in some parking in here, and there's a real challenge to how we play with this, and luckily we had some great interactions with Carbrick and this sort of Flemish bond concrete brick wall going up, and we left out some of the bricks and created an amazing pattern. And it's also always weird to work with a contractor and to tell them to do it randomly, because contractors can't do things randomly. So we ended up drawing a sketch, and they worked from there, and we detailed it up, and they built it. We never really checked because it wasn't really that important. But one of the things we also did here is create a link between an existing building on the property called Ons Eerste Volksbank, where we created a link in an alley, an arcade through the existing building to the side. And those of you that have walked Pretoria CBD quite a lot, you'll see that there's a huge amount of arcades crisscrossing and dissecting the big city blocks in the north-south direction. And this linked into that space and ultimately created an amazing courtyard with an Angus Taylor sculpture in there. But then on higher levels, it opens up into a courtyard space and really creates a space for people to engage and escape from the city. I think I need to go a little bit quicker. This is then a little bit less people that have influenced in how we work for them. This is a building called Digicall. It's just off in Craighall Park in Johannesburg. And it was done for a client that owns a glass company as well as one of the companies that it was really a play on how to do this sort of glass facade and push a little bit of the envelope in how we do that and create this space where he can drop off his car and walk into the building as well. So a little bit of a rethink of Porte Cogere, and ultimately going into the lobbies in there, into the building. This was a building, an upgrade, an additional sort of parking structure, and then also retail area in the building in Braamfontein. And the focus there was really the interface of how we interface with the public environment and the pedestrians, again, walking past, and also creating an extra link in retail for that, but that sort of complemented the buildings and the commercial office buildings in the area, both in the area, but also then on top of where we were building. This is just a view into Oakland and Sandton that is now called Workshop 17, a fit out for Workshop 17 that we did there. This is a fit out for Workshop 17 in Paarl as well, that a very successful sort of intervention into a building called the Tabakes in that area. This is an upgrade of a dreary shopping centre in Eladas Park, Pretoria. And yeah, the focus was really about the walkways and how we make it friendlier for people to walk in this area. It's a nice sort of strip mall, but it was very hard and people didn't really go there. And since the completion of this building and an additional sort of GLA that we added, it has really popped up and has really sort of flown, and the developer is just so happy with the uptake of more people coming into the centre. Then we also designed for more people and how they sort of interface and things. And this next project is a very interesting project. It's called Elevate, and it was really our first endeavour into micro-living and how we engage that, and where we interrogated the micro of the apartment, but also the meso and how you sort of interface within the sort of building itself, but then the macro and how the building really interfaces into the urban fabric. And what we did here is sort of look at this 2,000 square meter site in Doornfontein in Johannesburg, and how that works and how it sat in the area and how it interacted with existing buildings, but also a after school facility called Skaterstaan that sits to the north of the building, where they do after sort of school activities with kids. But then ultimately clients always want to maximize it, but you need to make it work on various things. And what we did there is, in essence, create a perimeter block that engaged both sort of the street level, but also the Skaterstaan. And with micro living in this area, we knew that we were not going to interact with a lot of families, but it will be more sort of maybe couples and single people living in these. And there are 403 micro apartments, of the majority, 370 of them being 15 square meter apartments, so they're tiny. And what we know from the area as well, that there wasn't really an engagement for retail or need for retail in the area on the ground floor, and we couldn't put apartments or residential on the ground floor. So what we ended up is how we looked at this and saying, but what if we lift the building skirt and lift the building up and give the bottom down to both the community and most probably the Skaterstaan kids to the north. And this is sort of the initial proposal of how we can look at the street interface and how that can be done and sort of engage with Skaterstaan to the north. But ultimately, ended up with the building elevate because we elevated it from the ground. And then in the courtyard at the back, you can still sort of see at the bottom here where we've lifted the skirt, and you can see through and engage underneath that building, but then gave it back to Skaterstone where they can do skateboarding on and kids' activities in that courtyard. This is really what the apartments look like. This is a building interface in sort of Mill Park area. It's called Stanley Studios. It was interesting just to add 3 stories of the building over existing parking lot, and where there used to be a sort of a mall that we demolished and used lightweight construction methods to build 3 levels of residential above that. Then we also go more people and influence more people in how we interact with that, and how we enhance people's lives on that. And one of the projects you probably would know is called Jewel City. It is in the Doornfontein area, or just to the west of what people would refer to as Mabaneng in Johannesburg. So you can see the M1, and there, that is Mabaneng to the side, Ellis Park, and various precincts around that. But what is amazing and what is very important for us in this building is it was an existing 6 city block precinct that was all walled for a dual precious stone trading. And we really did the sort of Berlin Wall thing, breaking down the walls, and how it was important for us, how we interact and connect back into the city. So we've designed a thing called the Foxtrot, and it's Fox Street there, and it's plans to take it further up into the sort of APSA precinct, but really the activation of spaces and buildings in that area, and how that sort of worked with creating the first sort of green new space in and then lawn space within Johannesburg CBD, but also really focusing on people that both live in these buildings, because block 6 and block 1 in this is residential, but then ultimately taking that further, I need to go quicker into creating a space where people really loved. And within the first week of opening up the walls, people started using Fox Street and no longer Main and Commissioner. And whenever I go back there, it is really just a vibrant space, and people love it. And there was a lot of focus of designing spaces for people and skateboarders to use this. So all the furniture was really skateboarder friendly, and really creating something weird, but a water feature for the first one, really, that kids can play with in the inner city. And just what the units look like. We've also designed, and we've been privileged enough to design an amazing building that is really for families and the community and the smaller community as such, which is the Green School out in Paarl area, and something that we are very proud of the team that did this. And it's such an amazing project to work with, and how this has really worked on the basis of really a net zero and a carbon neutral building. And it's no longer, it's not just the green building principles that are sometimes, and I sort of don't like, tick box exercise of working through. We've also done, and diversely to the other side, is like a spa in the water, in Polo Fields and Waterfall area, that I'm very proud of, and it was really a fun exercise. What are we busy with at the moment? Various scales and various other people that we'd like to think that we work for and enhance their lives. And 2 of the projects are student orientated. This is called the Apex, or the Groove, out in Braamfontein in Johannesburg, just by the end of Satonga interface and gate into Wits. This next one is the Peak, and is in Cape Town. And they all will be finished by the end of the year, and a big push by our team and those faces you saw on the front pages, and getting this finished. And then something that we've only recently been allowed to lift the veil of. This is the new head office extension for the South African Reserve Bank, and that interface in there, and it's an amazing project. We've learned a huge amount on various things, and most of those things I'll have to kill you if I tell you what they are. But it's really the focus, really, and making sure that we do consider ultimately the pedestrian and how people see the bank, and making sure that they don't, is not just this sort of black block that is currently on the building. And we are involved in what you see in the sort of corner and sort of up to space, and then ADA architects are engaging on the tower block and the refurb of that portion of the building. And it is an interesting project, King's Quarter, which is a provincial heritage building, and we've salvaged a huge amount of bricks on there, and we are using and repurposing it for a screen over the parking area again there. Then we are also designing for a huge amount of other people and more people and how they do this, and we are involved in Bala World project, which is ultimately a precinct for just over 4,000 apartments, and it's an amazing process. And doing that and seeing again, taking the things that we've learned from something like a Tool City and implementing them on a greenfields project, which is amazing. So what are we designing at the moment? We're designing still for smaller families, and this is a project out in Nature's Valley. It is a little, we call it Curland Pavilion. So really sort of play for a holiday home for a family, a big polo playing family. The next slide can come up. There's a lodge in the Karoo that we're working on, and hopefully this will not just stay a dream. This is a house in the George area, and we are very, very excited about this and how that will go. This is a house, amazing house that is currently sort of hitting the ground in Stellenbosch. And then we are going back to some of the project that we are very proud of, and that sort of small community of family and really family of people. We are busy with the second phase, or phase 3 really, in essence, of the Green School, and this is a little bit of a glimpse into that. Then we are also doing a little bit of other stuff, and a little bit more people but less people, and where we are designing a new head office for a software company, and really focusing a lot of how people work and coming back to the office after sort of working from home in a pandemic area. We are also, weirdly enough, being a head office for a health company, and also the warehouse facility that goes for that. And then we are again also busy with some bigger and impact on more people's lives. And where we are, this is a redevelopment of the triangle as such, and where the civic centre is in Randburg. It's ultimately 2,000 social housing units, but with a great emphasis again about how people that use the taxi rank to the side, and the informal traders and people, how they would walk through this. And it's amazing pedestrianized area, but also just to really make it bigger and better. This is some more residential, student residential in the Cape Town area, just next to the peak space that we are busy with. And then going to more and more people. So this is, I can't really tell you too much about this one, but this is a project that we will hopefully be able to lift the veil off soon, where we are really engaging from an urban aspect of new urbanism, and really how we will do this, and going into a big, massive infill project within an existing urban fabric. So hopefully soon we will be able to tell you more about this. And then massive amount of people that we are grateful, and we've just recently won the bid to redevelop a major intervention to the north of Pretoria, and where we're looking at really the pragmatism and how we connect into the site, but how we connect to the rest of South Africa, but also to the outside of the world, and we're looking at how we connect in that area, but also ultimately making sure that we have responsible design. People always like to call it sustainable design. At GATS, we call it responsible design, because it's just really the right thing to do. You don't have to tick boxes and win little plaques in your buildings. You just need to do the right thing for the environment, and also the real community that you're working with. And really the placemaking within that, making sure that we do ultimately design for people, and making sure that they are living in really sustainable and communities as such. And that identity that goes into that. And this project is called First Land. And this project is an amazing thing to be busy with, where it is really 3,000 hectares of land with 1,500 hectares of developable land, and we are busy with the urban design on that, and hopefully we get 5% of the architecture in there of this, and we'll be happy with that, and making sure that people create and live in an amazing environment ultimately. And one lasting thought is never undermine the cliche of Ubuntu, because we all really need each other to be people, and we can never be alone. We need everybody else to have a great society and be respectful for everybody. And that's my swan song. Hope I didn't go too far. Thank you.
Great. No, what, Georg, thank you very, very much. I asked you to share the work that you are doing as a architectural studio, and you've done just that. And I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get you back to discuss two things with us. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we're not taking any questions. But first of all, how do you structure your practice to be able to do such a variety of work? And secondly, how do you market and get the work? I'm sure that our colleagues would love to know a bit of that as well. But it's exciting. I mean, some of those images I can remember seeing, and without knowing that that you were the architects, they were inspirational. So I'm going to thank you, and unfortunately that then wraps up. But please don't leave.
Too much of your time.
No, don't worry about that. Don't worry. Architects like looking, and that's exactly what we did. So I'm going to then ask Emil and Georg, you're most welcome to switch your cameras off, and then I'm going to just conclude today's SAIAshare. I'm sure that you would like me on your behalf to thank once again Alex and George for two inspirational presentations. Thank you so much for making your time and effort available to show us what you've done. And Alex, once again, I am, and I think we're all astounded at what engineers brought to the table this afternoon. Thank you once again to Duravit for making this free event possible. A special word of thanks to all of you who attended. Just remember, without your attendance, SAIAshare would not exist. So please, when it's possible, do carry on supporting the initiative. You've already been told about the CPD points that will accrue to you automatically. Then we invite you to join us on the first Friday of February. Remember, there will be no January presentation. We skip January. The first Friday in January is normally still in the holiday period. So we look forward with anticipation to introducing you to the work of SAIATA, the company SAIATA from Cape Town. Oops. Let's backtrack there. Let's first introduce you to our first international speaker after 20 SAIAshare events, Hendrik Prinsloo, all the way from California. Hendrik holds a PhD in delay analysis. His latest book, Construction Delay Analysis Simplified, published by Amazon in 11 countries, is a popular resource for delay claims worldwide, and a prescribed textbook has been presented by professional industry organizations on 4 continents. And I'm sure that's going to be most enlightening, in a nutshell, how to deal with time claims. Then it's going to be our privilege also to introduce you to Philippe Fouchier. He's a principal of practice SAIATA in Cape Town. Philip is the recipient of several international awards for projects designed under his lead. He will speak on 3 themes in SAIATA. So we stand at the threshold of a new year, 2023 is around the corner. Many of us are apprehensive about the future, especially after what Alex told us. But let's listen to Mo's advice. Mo's advice, courtesy of Charlie Mackesy. What is that out over there? It's the wild, said Mo. Don't fear it. So colleagues, 2023 might seem daunting, but don't fear it. Thank you for attending. We see you in February.